The beeping was the first thing I registered. A steady pulse that felt like it was coming from inside my own chest, instead of the monitor beside the bed. White, fluorescent lights burned through my half-closed eyelids. Each flicker a sharp needle in the dense fog of pain, clouding my mind. Someone was talking over me. A voice layered with a calm urgency that couldn't quite hide the tremor beneath. "Laura, can you hear me? Stay with us." I tried to nod. But my head was an anchor. Too heavy to lift. Each breath was a razor in my throat. As if the simple act of breathing was a privilege I no longer deserved. The stretcher rattled under me, and I could feel the sharp sting on my cheek, where the skin had split open. My hair was matted and sticky. "Who did this to you?" "Laura," the voice asked again. Softer this time. I squeezed my eyes shut. And instead of the hospital ceiling, I saw the grand mirror in our foyer shattering in slow motion. The pieces catching the light, like 1,000 falling stars. I heard my father's voice. Not the polished one he used for investors, but the one reserved for me. "Do not bring shame on this family." Then the sharp crack of his hand against my face. The world spinning sideways. My mother's fingers twisted in my hair. Her voice, a furious whisper. "Look what you've made him do." And in the blur of my vision, my brother, Daniel, the golden boy, smirked as if my pain was the punchline to a joke he'd been waiting years to hear. It was my family. I breathed. The words tasting of metal and betrayal. They wanted a jet. The sentence sounded insane, but it was the truth. A private jet. A birthday present. A new trophy for the son who was born to inherit the world. Not the daughter who spent 26 years being the perfect, invisible support structure, smoothing over every crisis, managing every detail, until my usefulness was assumed and my love was a commodity. A monitor began beeping faster. My own heart, betraying the calm I fought so hard to project. "Hang on. Laura, we've got you." The kindness in the paramedic's voice was a blow more stunning than the first. The emergency room doors hissed open, and the cold night air was a shock to my system. My stretcher rolled across polished floors, hands guiding me with a gentleness I wasn't accustomed to. I was used to being a tool. A function. Second to the brilliant son who got everything while I learned to shrink. To anticipate. To survive. Staring up at the white lights blurring into one another, I saw my life as a story I had never been allowed to write. A nurse brushed the hair from my forehead. "We're going to take good care of you. Sweetheart." Asterisk sweetheart. Asterisk. The word was a foreign country. A tear escaped, tracing a path along my temple. And I almost apologized for it before I remembered I was done apologizing. If you're hearing this, you might know someone like me. The one who holds everything together. The one who is praised for being responsible. Which is just another word for exploitable. And maybe you know that exact moment when duty stops feeling like love and starts feeling like a prison sentence. Mine came in a flash of shattered glass and a father's rage, telling me my worth was measured only by what I could provide. I had given and given until all I had left was silence, and that silence was my rebellion. It was my final no. As they rushed me into the trauma bay, I realized I wasn't dying. I was being born. The version of me who lived for them was gone, and the woman who would finally live for herself was clawing her way out. When you're a child, you think love is automatic? Like the air you breathe. You only notice it when you start to suffocate. I grew up in a sprawling stone mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. A place where success wasn't just a goal. It was a religion. Our house was a fortress of achievement that my parents, Richard and Catherine, wore like armor from the outside. We were the perfect family, the titan of industry father, the elegant socialite mother, the brilliant heir, Daniel, and me, the quiet, well-behaved daughter. They never saw that being well-behaved wasn't a personality trait, it was a survival strategy. When I was 8, I was already managing the household schedule because my mother was too busy with her charities. At 12, I was editing Daniel's essays because my father insisted that a Sterling's academic record must be flawless. When I asked for help with my own project, my father looked up from his paper and said, "Laura, you're self-sufficient. Daniel has pressures you don't understand." Self-sufficient meant you were on your own. Forgotten. The day I won the state science fair, I ran home with a first-place ribbon clutched in my hand. My mother was on the phone, planning a gala. She glanced at the ribbon, gave me a tight, distracted smile, and said, "That's lovely. Dear, put it in your room. Don't interrupt the caterer." Daniel's third-place trophy from a junior golf tournament sat in a glass case in my father's study. I learned to swallow my achievements, to never ask for more. Because when I did, the answer was always the same. We need you to be practical. Daniel's future requires investment. Your future is to support the family. What they meant was, your life is secondary. I became the family's ghostwriter, problem solver, and emotional shock absorber. Adults praised me for my maturity. "You're so lucky. Laura is so easy." They'd tell my parents. My parents would smile, taking credit for the obedience they had engineered through neglect. My role was codified by the time I was a teenager. I was the family's chief operating officer, unpaid and unacknowledged. When I got my first part-time job at a bookstore, I saved every penny, dreaming of a small apartment, of a life that was my own. My parents saw my bank account, not as my future, but as their emergency fund. It started with a few $100s for a new suit for Daniel, then $1,000 for a summer program he wanted to attend. They always said, "Family helps. Family." But the help only ever flowed in one direction. One night, when I was 16, I overheard them talking. "We can't afford the down payment on the new summer house," my mother said, her voice tight with anxiety. Daniel was so looking forward to it. There was a pause. And then my father said, "Laura has over $10,000 saved. She won't mind. It's for the family." The next morning, they sat me down and explained that my savings were needed for a critical family investment. I watched the money I had worked for, the money that represented my escape, disappear from my account. It didn't feel like helping. It felt like theft. They called me selfless. I felt erased. The turning point came when I was 17, with an envelope that arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. My grandfather, my mother's father, had passed away years earlier. He was a quiet gentleman who used to watch me with a sad understanding in his eyes. He had left a trust in my name. Not a colossal fortune, but enough to build a life, enough to be free. The letter from his lawyer stated the funds would be released to me on my 25th birthday, or earlier in a case of extreme hardship. I read the words, "For Laura, and Laura alone." And for the first time, I felt seen. But my hope was short-lived. The lawyer also sent a notification to my parents, and their reaction was immediate. "That's family money," my father declared at a tense dinner that night. "It will be used to secure Daniel's position. We'll need you to sign over management rights to me." Daniel smirked from across the table. "You should be proud to invest in my future." "Sis." I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my life. I refused. Quietly, but firmly. And that was when the pressure started. After the trust was revealed, the atmosphere in our house grew toxic. My mother would cry, telling me I was tearing the family apart with my selfishness. My father would lecture me, his voice cold and hard, about loyalty and a daughter's duty. "You are not equipped to handle this responsibility. Laura," he'd say, "you will make a mess of it." Daniel would taunt me. "Just sign the papers. You'll marry some rich guy eventually anyway. You don't need it." The constant psychological warfare was exhausting. They made me feel like wanting my own life was a betrayal. I started making plans in secret. I met with my grandfather's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, who assured me the trust was ironclad. "Your grandfather was a wise man," he said, his eyes kind. "He knew you would need to be protected." I opened a new bank account, researched apartments in the city, and started quietly moving my most important possessions into a small storage unit I rented with cash. The pressure at home escalated. One evening, my father cornered me in his study. He slammed his hand on his desk, his face red with fury. "I am warning you, Laura, do not defy me. This family has given you everything. You owe us." His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "There are ways to make you cooperate. Don't make me choose the hard way." The threat hung in the air, cold and terrifying. I knew then that I had to get out. My escape plan was set for the day after Daniel's 28th birthday party. It was meant to be a quiet disappearance. But they had other plans. The day of the party was a grand affair. A display of wealth and power designed to celebrate the family heir. My father stood to give a toast, his voice booming across the perfectly manicured lawn. He praised Daniel's brilliance, his ambition, his bright future. Then, he turned to me. And we must thank his sister. Laura, he said, a cruel smile playing on his lips, whose contribution will be securing Daniel's next major acquisition, a new Gulfstream jet. The guests applauded. My father held out a pen and a document papers that would transfer control of my trust to him. Sign it. Laura, show everyone what family loyalty looks like. The world went silent. Every eye was on me. Daniel was beaming, expectant. My mother gave me a sharp warning look. My heart was hammering. But my voice, when it came, was steady. No. A collective gasp went through the crowd. There is no jet, I said, my voice getting stronger. The trust is mine. My future is mine. My father's face turned to stone. Do not humiliate me, he hissed. You owe us. Danielle snarled, grabbing my arm. I owe you nothing, I said, pulling away. That's when my father lunged. His hand cracked across my face, and the world exploded into pain and shattering glass as I fell back against the foyer mirror. The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and flashing lights. But in the sterile, quiet environment of the hospital room, clarity began to set in. The doctor called it a mild concussion and contusions. I called it the beginning of the end for my father. A social worker named Sarah came to my room. Her expression, gentle but firm. Laura, we are required to file a police report, she explained. What happened to you is not a family matter. It's a crime. For the first time, someone was validating what I had known my whole life. I told her everything. An hour later, 2 detectives arrived. I recounted the years of financial and emotional abuse, culminating in the assault at the party. They took my statement, and I saw a flicker of grim determination in their eyes. The next morning, my father was arrested at his office for assault and battery. The news spread like wildfire. Sterling CEO arrested for assaulting daughter. The headlines were brutal. The company's stock plummeted. My father, Richard Sterling, the man who believed he was untouchable, was forced to post a $100,000 bail and face a media firestorm. The look on his face in the mugshot, a mixture of shock and pure rage, was more satisfying than I could have imagined. But I knew this was just the first move. My father wouldn't go down without trying to destroy me. 2 days later, a courier delivered a legal notice to the women's shelter where I was staying. It was an emergency petition for conservatorship. He was claiming I was mentally unstable, emotionally disturbed, and incapable of managing my own affairs. His lawyers were trying to seize control of my trust by having me declared incompetent. It was a classic, vicious move. He wasn't just fighting back, he was trying to erase my credibility, my identity, my very sanity. He thought he was cornering a wounded animal. He had no idea he was dealing with a hunter who had been patiently waiting for years. I immediately called Mr. Harrison. He's trying to have me declared incompetent, I said, my voice cold, and even, don't worry, Laura, he replied, his tone reassuring. He has no idea what he's just walked into. Your grandfather prepared for this exact scenario. Mr. Harrison met me the next morning. Your grandfather was a brilliant man, Laura. But Richard ruined him, he began, his face grim. He didn't just steal your grandfather's company, he stole his life's work. Your grandfather, Arthur, developed a revolutionary biorefining process that became the foundation of Sterling Industries. Richard was his junior partner. He forged documents, patented the process under his own name, and forced Arthur out with nothing. The stress of the betrayal caused the heart attack that killed him. The story hit me like a physical blow. My father's entire empire was built on a lie. But your grandfather was meticulous. Mr. Harrison continued. Before he died, he gathered all the original research, his lab notebooks, the forged documents, and a signed, Notarized confession from a junior chemist who Richard paid off. He put it all in a safety deposit box. He slid a small, ornate key across the table. He also amended his will. He didn't just leave you the trust. He left you this. He left you the truth. We went to the bank. Inside the cold steel box was a lifetime of evidence. Meticulously organized. There were scientific journals in my grandfather's handwriting, side by side with my father's clumsy forgeries. But the most damning item was a small cassette tape. Your grandfather recorded his last conversation with Richard. Mr. Harrison said, placing a small player on the table. I pressed play. My grandfather's weak, tired voice filled the room. Richard, just admit what you did. For your own soul. Then my father's voice. Young, arrogant, and chillingly casual. The world doesn't care about souls. Arthur, it cares about winners. You were a brilliant scientist, but a terrible businessman. I did what was necessary. That company is mine. Your legacy is mine. I clicked stop, my hands trembling with rage. But there was more. The trust my grandfather had set up wasn't just money he'd saved. He had secretly filed a lawsuit against a subsidiary of Sterling Industries for patent infringement years ago. Using a shell corporation. He won. And the settlement decreed that a small percentage of all profits from that bio-refining process would be paid out in perpetuity. Those payments had been quietly accumulating in my trust for over a decade. The current balance was not just a few $100,000. It was over $83 million. He left you a choice. Mr. Harrison said softly, walk away with the money and live your life. Or use it to take back your family's name. There was no choice. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my grandfather. The conservatorship hearing was my father's home turf, a courtroom where money and influence usually won. He had hired the most expensive legal team in the state. He walked in, looking confident and powerful. Every bit the concerned father worried about his unstable daughter. My mother and Daniel sat behind him. Their expressions a perfect blend of sorrow and piety. His lawyer painted a picture of me as a troubled, vindictive young woman, lashing out at a loving family. They presented my secret escape plans as proof of my paranoia. My refusal to fund Daniel's jet as a sign of my irrationality. It was a masterful performance. When it was my turn, I didn't have a high-priced lawyer. I had Mr. A. Harrison. And I had the truth. Mr. Sterling. Mr. Harrison began, his voice calm and steady. How you claim your daughter is mentally unstable? Is it also your claim that your entire company, Sterling Industries, is built on a foundation of lies and theft? My father's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection relevance. It is entirely relevant. Your Honor. Mr. Harrison said, turning to the judge. As it speaks directly to Mr. Sterling's character and his motivation for silencing his daughter, the judge allowed it. Mr. Harrison presented the evidence. Piece by piece. The forged patent documents, my grandfather's original lab notebooks, the signed confession from the chemist. The courtroom was silent as he laid out the decades-old crime. My father's face went pale. His lawyers were scrambling, completely blindsided. Then, Mr. Harrison held up the cassette tape. And now, Your Honor, we would like to play a recording of Richard Sterling, in his own words, admitting to the theft that launched his career. My father lunged forward. That's inadmissible. It's a violation of... It was recorded legally in a two-party consent state. Richard. Mr. Harrison said coolly. He pressed play. My father's young, arrogant voice filled the courtroom, boasting about being a winner, about taking my grandfather's legacy. The judge's expression hardened. She looked at my father, then at me. The petition for conservatorship is denied, she said, her voice like cracking ice. And I am referring this evidence to the district attorney's office for an immediate investigation into fraud and intellectual property theft. My mother let out a small sob. Daniel stared at his father, his hero, as if seeing him for the first time. My father looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure, it was terrifying. He had lost. He had walked into his own trap. As we walked out of the courtroom, a swarm of reporters surrounded us. I stepped up to the microphones. "My name is Laura Sterling," I said, my voice clear and strong. "But the name I am proud to carry is my grandfather's Arthur Gable. Richard Sterling is a thief and a fraud. And today, his lies finally came to an end." 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of the newly opened Gable Institute for Applied Sciences, a non-profit research foundation I had created to honor my grandfather's true legacy. The fall of Richard Sterling had been swift and total. Faced with overwhelming evidence of fraud and a separate, brutal trial for assault, he was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Sterling Industries collapsed under the weight of the scandal and shareholder lawsuits. Its assets were liquidated. The mansion was sold. My mother, stripped of her social standing and wealth, moved to a small condo in Florida. Daniel, his future of effortless success gone, was forced to get a real job. He sent me one email. "You destroyed everything." I wrote back. He did. The $83 million from my trust became the seed money for the Gable Institute. We now fund the kind of brilliant, ethical scientists my grandfather was, ensuring their work would never be stolen. A month after the sentencing, I received a letter from my father in prison. It was one sentence. Asterisk, "You are just like him." Asterisk. He meant it as an insult. I took it as the highest compliment I had ever received. I framed it and hung it in my office. This morning, we awarded our first major grant to a young biologist developing a new, clean water filtration system. Seeing the hope and determination in her eyes, I knew I had made the right choice. My grandfather's legacy wasn't a company. It was a passion for discovery and a commitment to truth. That was my real inheritance. If you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel like your dreams are less important, or that your worth is tied to what you can provide for others, remember this. The power they hold over you is the power you give them. Your life, your future, and your truth belong to you alone. My name is Laura Gable, and I am the granddaughter of a brilliant man whose legacy was almost stolen. Today, the fortune built on his stolen work is funding a new generation of dreamers. That is my justice. That is my peace. If this story meant something to you, please like this video. Share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that it is never too late to reclaim your own story. And comment below with a time you had to fight for your own truth. You are not alone.